Hello and welcome to the D3 Energy live stream. This is Greg Davis again. I'm having some connection difficulties. And welcome back to the video series where I'm talking about oil and gas in the United States, America's incredible resurgence and the growth of our production and the resurgence of conventional oil and gas in the United States. And again, I've been talking about America's hydrocarbon dominance and who paved the way for America's hydrocarbon dominance, where we are in the position, where we are in the world stage today. Our industry is dominant. We're producing more oil and gas today than we ever have. Who paved the way? And so this is a continuation of the series where I am talking about the pioneers of our oil and gas industry, the legends. And it's one of my favorite topics. So I want to talk to you today about one of the great oil men of the modern oil and gas era, H.L. Hunt. And one of the reasons H.L. Hunt is so interesting to me and near and dear to my heart is because he was a good friend of my father and my grandfather. And my father always talked about H.L. Hunt. H.L. Hunt used to come to New York, and this was back in the 40s. And he was at the time already a big oil man, was already on his way to becoming 100, 200, 300 millionaire, and ultimately a billionaire. And he used to come to New York where my grandfather and my father lived, and my mother. My father was in the dress business at the time, but my grandfather liked to do investments. He was a bit of a gambler, and he would invest in things. And he was in the clothing business at the time, but he also had invested in a fabric manufacturing plant, the plant that invented seersucker. He also was a boxer, and he used to back boxers. And he also, my grandfather, invested into oil. And he invested in some oil wells early on. This was in 1939. But one of the people that my father and grandfather got to meet was H.L. Hunt, who would come to New York, and he was a very colorful man, very colorful guy, and used to hang out in the speakeasies and at the Copacabana and places like that. And my father got to meet him, and my granddad had invested in some oil wells, and my father got his first advice from H.L. Hunt, who said to him, "The man who drills the most wells has the best chance of finding the most oil." And that was always my father's motto. He always said, H.L. told me, the man who drills the most wells has the best chance of finding the most oil. And that advice paid off greatly for my father, who also went on to become one of the great oil men of the modern era. Who was H.L. Hunt? Well, H.L. Hunt started out in very modest beginnings. His father was a farmer. He was one of 8 children, and he was home educated. But he was a bit of a math wizard. That was what he was known for, even though he wasn't formally educated. He was very good with numbers. He was a gambler and was very good at gambling. In fact, he made a lot of money gambling, and that is how he made enough money to start investing in oil fields. And he was also a very shrewd businessman. He knew how to spot a good deal, and he knew how to use his brain to work out very clever oil deals. And one of the most clever oil deals that he ever made resulted in one of the largest oil fields ever discovered in the United States. So in about 1935, there was a fellow who he heard about through one of his business dealings. His name was Joyner, who became nicknamed Dad Joyner. And he became nicknamed Dad Joyner because Dad Joyner was really the guy who officially discovered, had the idea of drilling in East Texas, where there was some oil that had been found, but nothing like what he was about to find. But he became known as Dad Joyner because he was the father of the oil industry and the East Texas oil field. H.L. Hunt heard about this guy, Dad Joyner, who himself was a very colorful guy, a little bit of a charlatan, and he had drilled wells here and there with not much success. And what Dad Joyner became known for, but before anybody really realized it, is he would come up with an oil deal. He'd find a piece of land to drill on, and then he'd go around to investors and sell those investors a piece of the oil deal. What those investors didn't know is that he was overselling the deal. He would go sell more than 100% of a deal, 120, 130% of a deal, with the idea that he would pocket the money and hopefully not find any oil, have a dry hole, so he never had to answer to those investors. So he would oversell deals. Well, H.L. Hunt knew about this. And so he met with Dad Joyner, and he knew about this one particular deal that he had in the East Texas area. And so H.L. started talking to him and wanted to learn more about the deal and became fascinated with it. He also knew that he had some trouble, that he had oversold the deal. And so he started negotiating the deal. Dad Joyner goes out and he starts drilling this well. And back then the wells take several days or weeks, several weeks to drill. And it was a long, arduous process, especially in the 1930s. And as this well is starting to approach its total depth where the prize is supposed to be, H.L. meets him at the Adolphus Hotel in Dallas and starts talking to him. And H.L. has his guys out in the field, kind of watching how things are going. And the well's about to reach TD, and things start looking pretty good. Well, over a cheese and crackers meal that H.L. had with Dad Joyner, he struck a deal and bought this East Texas oil field before it was an oil field. The Daisy Bradford was the name of the well. He bought the field from him for $1 million. And he did it because he knew that he had oversold the deal, and he basically told Dad Joyner, I will buy this field from you and solve all of your problems for $1 million. And Dad Joyner sold him that field. At the same time, the well came in, and it was a gusher. It was a big well. Now, nobody knew that it was going to go on to become one of the largest oil fields in America. H.L. Hunt cut that deal. Dad Joyner was the father of the modern oil industry because he discovered that field more on chance as opposed to his brain power. And H.L. Hunt cleverly bought that field from him right at the time that he knew it was a success, and then he knew that he had Dad Joyner over a barrel because Dad Joyner had oversold the deal. And had it been successful, he would have had more investors in that deal, had sold more than 100%. So the long and short of it is, H.L. Hunt cut what would become one of the greatest deals of all time using his brain power and his intuition. Dad Joyner became known as the father of the modern oil industry. H.L. Hunt discovered the largest oil field in the United States. The East Texas oil field went on to produce about 5.4 billion barrels. Over 30,000 wells have been drilled over the years. In fact, many of those wells are still producing today. Who made all the money from the East Texas oil field? H.L. Hunt. And H.L. went on to become one of the wealthiest men in the United States, discovered many, many more fields, and really was credited as being one of the great wildcatters of all time. He had a little bit of help from Dad Joyner. So, and my father would talk about H.L. Hunt, with, great passion all the time. He told many stories about him. One of the things that was an interesting side note is about 1945, 46, when my mom and dad got married, or were about to get married. My mom talks about this. My mother said there was a knock on the door. It was a day or two before the wedding that my mom and dad were going to get married. And there was a knock on the door. And she opened the door, and it was H.L. Hunt. And again, they were living in New York at the time. So she opens the door. H.L. says, "Barbara, I want you to come downstairs. I have your wedding gift." And so she went downstairs. And what was there? A brand new Cadillac. H.L. Hunt bought my mom and dad their first wedding gift, or their biggest wedding gift, a brand new Cadillac. That's how wealthy he was. And that's the kind of guy that H.L. was. H.L. lived a very big, colorful life. In fact, he had multiple wives. He was a polygamist. He had 3 wives. And those wives didn't know each other. He had wives spread across the country and ended up having over 15 children. 3 wives, 15 children. Discovered one of the greatest oil fields of the modern time, one of the biggest oil fields today. An incredible guy, and very colorful guy. Gave my father his first advice. The man who drills the most oil, drills the most wells, has the chance of finding the most oil. That was H.L. Hunt. And I always loved hearing those stories that my father would tell about H.L. Hunt. H.L. Hunt has long ago passed. My father has passed as well. But I remember those stories like it was yesterday. So, that's my history lesson for today about H.L. Hunt, one of the greatest oil men of the modern oil and gas era. And it's men like H.L. Hunt, men and women of our industry today, that are going to continue to lead us into this new era. America, again, is hydrocarbon dominant. We have the greatest hydrocarbon oil and gas industry in the world. And it is why America is so powerful today, and our resurgence. We have our resurgence on the world stage. And it is going to continue. It's continuing. And again, with the resurgence and this paradigm shift to include conventional oil and gas reservoirs development into our oil and gas industry, we're going to continue to grow. And it's a very, very exciting time. And so I appreciate you taking time to be with me today to hear about one of the great oil men in our history. And there's several more that I'm going to talk about. The next one I'm going to talk about is my favorite, my late father, Marvin Davis. And I look forward to sharing about him and his legacy in the next installment. So, thank you very much. Please spread these videos. Please ask your friends to share, to like these videos. Help me, help us. Let's all join together and continue to make America hydrocarbon dominant. Continue to make America great. Thank you very much.